Today's episode of On the Ground Parenting is made possible by the generous donations of our listeners. To learn more, look in the show notes or listen to the end of the episode.
Welcome back to On the Ground Parenting podcast offered by Muskoka Family Focus. My name is Sandy, and I'm pleased to be with my colleagues,
Sam
and Kelly.
Welcome, everyone. We've launched into September, and we're talking about beginnings, New Year's, things that may upset the apple cart, things that may be a rudder for us. So, what arises for you whenever we think about all of these new beginnings? Or maybe it's not a new beginning, but it's a new experience that we're having. Sometimes we started off and everything was okay. And then suddenly it's not okay anymore. And I think about with my kids when those experiences happened. And I can remember saying that one of my children, I could tell that they were not at one with their skin. And it was just a bit of a jiggity joggity time for them that they were not so settled with things that were happening within relationships at school and friends and maybe even teachers. Does that ever happen in your family, Kelly?
As you said that, you reminded me of this mood one of my kiddos would get in, and we in our family started referring to it as the kick the cat mood. And generally, my daughter was a fairly easygoing kid, but when she got into this kick the cat mood, she couldn't contain her energy. She would wipe the whole table off with one arm, she'd stomp everywhere. And often it was happening in a period of transition. So it would happen in September, it would happen in particular times. And I used to just give her a little bit more grace and a little bit more grace, and it would get worse. And I found that if I really hugged her, looked at her, made a firm boundary with her, she often sort of melted down, kind of then told me what was going on. And then the sun would come up behind her and she would have a complete mood change. And I've learned a lot from that kiddo about how important consistency is in my own parenting. And when she's feeling out of sorts and out of control with the world, she kind of pushes right at her parents. And what she wants is a real firm space, not somebody to roll over and be walked on. But it took me a while to really learn that and appreciate that about her.
What a great example of being in a relationship with your child because you're learning from them, they're learning from you. It's just that whole cycle of being together and learning how to navigate the world as a team.
One thing that I think about too is during that time of, the upset, and sometimes it's a mystery to me. Can't really figure it out because sometimes my kids wouldn't be able to articulate it. Like, you could just tell, as Kelly, you mentioned that sort of that energy that you could tell the shift in the energy, but they weren't able to put a word to it. They were just, yeah, like the behavior was like kick the cat. Like they were just sort of creating havoc. It was a bit chaotic and trying to figure it all out. And I know that bedtime was a great time for us to sort of sink in. And my kids, right up until they left home, we would always check in. They're settling in at, for nighttime. And I would just drop by the bedroom, maybe knock on the door if they were older and go in and sit on the bed. Sometimes I'd end up lying on the bed beside them. And that's when I would hear about all of the woes of the world that they were experiencing that were overwhelming them. It was like the safety and the security of the blankets and the bed and just everything would sort of be sloughing off of them and getting down to who they really were and what was problematic for them. And so I think that time, if anyone can afford that time, can find that time, can make that time to be in that space. And really, as a parent, what I needed to do was shut up. I needed to close my mouth and give them the space to be able to talk without me either solving a problem, giving feedback, or, criticizing or giving advice. It wasn't about that. It was just about listening. So I really think that's an important thing to offer to our kids is just listening.
So important. And it's so, I think it's taken, I mean, I don't know about you two, but it took me a while to learn that whole just ask what they need. Do you need suggestions? Do you need advice? Do you need someone to listen to and pick up on their cues to figure out what it is that they need if they aren't able to articulate that? Um, and it really, there are times when I could just feel the advice bubbling up inside of me, and I have to slam a lid on it and just keep that under wraps because it isn't what's needed in that moment. Down the road, there's probably going to be an opportunity to slip that in there in a way that's not as offensive or triggering. But in that very moment, I just need to be the person who listens and absorbs the venting. However, on that topic, we do have a phrase in this house where I can say to my children, if they're feeling particularly wound up about something and I've maybe had a crummy day and I don't have the bandwidth, I'll just say, I don't have the capacity to be your receptacle for venting right now. I need some time. So, is there someone else you can talk to? Or can you give me 10 or 15 minutes to get myself settled? And then I'm happy to listen to it. So, that's been a great tool in this life that we're living here.
I love that dance of boundaries, like looking after yourself, looking after them at the same time, and just naming what's really there. My youngest would come into my room and lay on my bed, and we called it our therapy sessions because I would go to bed early because I was tired and had a big day, and the next thing I know, he'd be there, and 3 hours later, I would hear all about what's going on in his world, which was lovely, but sometimes ill-timed, as many parents will joke about. But my other 2, they're not verbal like that. It takes them a long time to really articulate what they're thinking. They're unlikely to offer what's closest to their heart. And so we started maybe when they were 12. I can't remember how old they were. They might have been a bit younger, but we started a journal that they could put on my bed. They could write to me whatever they wanted. And then I would write back and put it on their pillow. And as introverted souls, that communication in some tough times really, I think, just helped us connect, helped me know what was going on. I think one time they really wanted to wear makeup. I personally don't wear makeup, and they were really worried that I would be upset with them or disappointed in them. And it's your body. You can wear makeup. I have some criteria for makeup in terms of like safety and chemicals in it and that kind of stuff, but you can wear it. And that lifted their whole weight off their shoulder, and I was really glad we had created this other way to connect in the evenings.
That's lovely. And now that you mention that, it occurs to me that we do something similar here. But with neurodiversity often comes difficulty with fine motor skills. So rather than a journal, it's a text message here quite often. If somebody's feeling some kind of way about something and they need to express it, but are concerned they're going to get heated, they'll send me a text message to let me know what's going on, which I think is perfect because then it's just there in black and white as if they had written it down, but it's accessible to them and attainable. And it really has helped navigate some situations that could have gotten pretty unpleasant probably if we had just gotten into it verbally and people's emotions got heightened. So I think having that opportunity to reflect before speaking or to speak in a way that isn't verbal can be very helpful for people, all people, young, old, everyone.
I'm thinking, so as both of you have shared about the way in which to communicate, like an alternative means, and I think about how my memory is of my sisters communicating with my mom writing on the insert from a package of pantyhose. So I can remember that. I was a little girl and I could remember seeing, that there would be this exchange of notes back and forth. And it was bewildering to me at the time. But so there you go over the span of years that we're looking at here. It's gone from, an insert from a pantyhose to an organized journal to a text message. So different means of writing, communicating, and I think that, and also we've talked about how we could have these chats on, at bedtime, because it tends to be a time when children are able to let go of maybe these walls that have helped them to keep it all together. But I'm also thinking about, when you're getting from point A to point B, whether you're walking or you're driving. And I know that many listeners might even be involved in transportation like subways, buses, trains. So I know that for my family, that often would be another way when all of a sudden so I'd be driving and it might be nighttime, and all of a sudden I would be hearing things that I had no idea that were going on, that my children were dealing with. And it was really great that I had to look forward and focus on my driving, because it kept that safe space for my kids, that I was a bit distracted, engaged in another activity, but still present. Have you experienced that as well?
We've had some pretty deep conversations in the van around here, and not always about upsetting things or stressful things, but sometimes just, different concepts. Or I can remember distinctly one very long conversation about the universe and black holes. I don't remember the content now, but I do recall Ryan saying to me, he was telling me about what happens if you get sucked into a black hole and how it's called spaghettification because you just like turn into this stringy. Anyways, it was this whole thing, and it was really, really funny. But then other times we were recently, like this is still, we still have these great conversations in the car. There had been a very loud discussion in the house between my older son and his girlfriend, and we were in the car driving, and Ryan made the observation that he sees that his older brother often behaves like his dad does when he's upset about something. And I said, "That's a really good observation." And then he said something about how he doesn't understand why people can be so loud and cranky. I'm like, well, that's a valid concern. And then he said, I don't know why people don't just talk honestly about their feelings. And I said, well, talking honestly about feelings can be really tricky because there's a lot of emotion involved in it. And he said, and I don't understand also why you adults don't just tell the kids in your life how you're feeling. And I said, sometimes we really feel like we have to protect our children from our feelings so that we're not influencing them and causing them to have a bad day or influencing how they feel about a situation. He's like, oh, I think it's pretty good that you just told me that, and I don't really understand why you couldn't have told me that much sooner because now I understand. Like, yep, you're right. I should have told you that a long time ago. But it was just this great little moment, which, I mean, Ryan conversations are usually quite entertaining, but it was a good, heartfelt connection and learning moment for both of us.
It's quite inspiring to hear this type of feedback. And I think about how we can be open to that, because at one point of my life, I know I would have been more bristly. And I think that that was my hang up. And so I'm always contemplating, what would I offer to someone else to help them be able to come into that place of being able to accept what's coming without fear, without judging, and the fear might be, oh no, my kid's going to be this way, or oh no, I've lost my handle on parenting in this family. So what what recommendations would you have about how to help someone come into being with their children, maybe being so forthright? Like, we talk about wanting that, but are we really able to be present with that?
Such a good question.
It is a good question. I think once you start to acknowledge that your child is a little human being who you want to have the skills to be able to manage life, it becomes a bit easier to have those open conversations. And you're not going to talk in detail about the most challenging concepts of mental illness with a small child, obviously. But as your kiddos get older, they have a greater understanding. And I think the more I've noticed here, the more open I am about how I'm feeling about things, the easier it is for other people to articulate their feelings. And it really has just taken some learning on my part to be able to do that. So the work, you have to put in the work because I don't know about you folks, but I certainly grew up in the I mean, I probably had a softer upbringing than some. My mom was quite in tune with her emotions, but there was a lot of stiff upper lip that was considered appropriate and important in our family. So if you were upset, you didn't show anyone you were upset and you kept your anger to yourself. And now, when I'm feeling angry about something, I tell my family, like, I am feeling really angry about this, so I need some time to process it. Or just the honesty. I think that really, but it is a learning thing. It takes practice. You have to practice it like other skills, right? Like you have to, if you want to be open and honest with your kids about your feelings, you have to practice being open and honest with them.
And that's the work. When you say that, like you have to do the work, I'm involved in some things that I'm definitely doing the work. So I'm familiar with that. But I know that years ago, I would not have known what that meant.
Hmm.
Anything that you want to expand on that, Sam or Kelly, for you to add into that? Like, what does doing the work mean?
For me, it's internal, honest conversations, but also conscious effort. So we have an emotions wheel that sat on our fridge for a long time. I'm sure a lot of folks are probably familiar with it, but on the inside of the wheel, it shows the most basic descriptions of emotions. And then the next level is a little bit more in depth about some of the variables, and then so on. And that was infinitely helpful because there would be a lot of anger, which often happens. So, "Oh, I see you're feeling angry. Can you tell me a bit more about that?" And they could look at the emotions wheel and pick what that really was. I'm angry because I feel like somebody's rights have been violated, or I'm angry because I'm jealous that this person got to do that, or that didn't seem fair. And it just was a better, more in-depth way of them exploring their feelings. And it was a great learning for all of us.
You're reminding me of a parent that I really admire who has that wheel by her front door, and that's part of their daily practice and their daily routine as the kids go to school. What you're feeling, how are you feeling right now? Which is just a moment of tuning in. And I think for me, that's been the work is developing a vocabulary that's bigger than happy, sad, mad, glad. And I've really appreciated Brené Brown's work in the Atlas of the Heart of really talking about what does that word mean. Like there's a difference between envy and jealousy. There's a difference between stressed and overwhelmed. And as my language has gotten more articulate, you can kind of get to the granular things, which also help with solutions. And for me, it's also been reading a lot of parenting books. What are the pieces that resonate with my values? What are the pieces that really helped me treat my kids with the respect that I always wanted to be treated with? And at an age appropriate level, I think I want to parent my kids the way I would want my adult friends or my partner to say to me. So if I came home crying and my partner said, "Go to your room until you settle out," that would be the end of our relationship. But if they said, "Oh, sweeties, you had a terrible day," and gave me a giant hug and said, "Do you want to talk about it?" I'd keep that one. And so I'm constantly doing that reflection, that inventory, the finding mentors, the watching parents who I think have really great skills, especially in the tough times. I'm not saying great parents with great skills who have perfect kids, but parents who speak respectfully about their kids, even though they're having real challenges with their kids in the moment. Those are the folks I kind of look for as little golden lights of how I might get better at this role and this job of mine.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really great time to just mention that we are the parent education staff at Muskoka Family Focus. We're part of the team. And a great way to practice these skills is to take a class, take a course, take a workshop, call it whatever you want. We're all learning together. So if you are interested in taking some sort of parent education, please feel free to reach out to us or check out our website. And I know it's listed in the link tree with the episode. But also, if you aren't in our area, please look for your local resources and still reach out to us. Absolutely. We do online
Mhm.
stuff all the time. So if you just, I know it sounds like a shameless plug, but the reality is, were it not for being in the role of a parent educator with Muskoka Family Focus, my children would not have the parent that they have now.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I made a note actually while we were talking, the emotions wheel, and I said parenting workshops, Muskoka Family Focus, and just the fact that we have What is it that you're interested in? We have a range, of spectrum. Is it that you want to, over a period of time, like over 10 weeks, you want to dive into it? You want to do the work? We've got that. Is it that you want to just sort of dip your toe in or explore one session? We've got that. So definitely follow through and make an inquiry. And yes, our workshops, we do offer an emotions wheel. And I think it is great for you to mention it, Sam, because in 1983, I think it was, that was the first time I was introduced to How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, a parenting program by Adele Faber and Elaine Maislish. And it's still a parenting program that I reference because the content is just so rich and it's so applicable. And so many other programs in between then and now. So I started as a participant and then I became a facilitator. And this is the work that we're talking about. It's that opportunity to self-reflect. And so for me, in another capacity in my life, I have mentors so that I can review the practices, the teaching that I'm offering, and reflect on, what's happening and how I'm responding to it. So I think as we take an overview or reflect of this particular session, we're looking at the ways that we're supporting our children, noticing the emotions that they may be having, how they're dealing with different situations and circumstances and people, how we're supporting them, the different ways that we're able to be there with them. And I just wanted to offer that there's also even that mealtime. So during mealtime, and where is mealtime for you? Is it around a table? Maybe not. Is sitting on a blanket on the floor? Maybe. Is it gathered on a couch? Wherever you are together that you're sharing a meal. And I know that some people are actually eating in a vehicle because the time when people are hungry is in transport. But what conversations can you have there that would be open ended with inquiry, with prompts to invite your children to reflect, and even games? I think that's something else that we could offer my parenting team. It would be the inquiry, the prompts for, games for games night, mealtime, and let's do it. So, as we wrap up from On the Ground, what rose up for you from this session? Kelly?
I think this conversation about parent ed in particular is a full circle moment. I took my very first parent ed course with two little kids and knowing that I needed a lot more skills. And that too was how to talk so kids will listen. And so you're just getting my brain going back in this whole flashback. What's really interesting too for me is I've heard that book now referred to in not only parenting circles, but also leadership and business circles. And I feel like being a parent ed mentor or a parent ed facilitator, it's a full circle of having taken the course and now teaching the course. But there's also this leadership piece. And I was once at a very important meeting where there's very serious things going on. And the person chairing the meeting, there was a lot of emotion directed at that person. And the next week or the next time we met, that person had brought in a lawyer to answer all those questions. And I was like, there we go, back to parenting. That's chapter 4 in How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. You don't need to know all the answers. You can get the experts. So join us for parent ed. We're not the experts, but we do love to have these conversations. That's what's sort of circling around for me, which isn't 3 or 2 or 1, but that's where I'm at.
Uh, I think what rises up for me is just the knowledge and acknowledgement that we're all still always learning. We're always learning. And some days we have better days than others. And I am by far not a perfect parent. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. But I do know that I am a more comfortable parent now than I was when I first started out because I didn't know what I was doing back then. I often tell my older children, I'm really sorry, but Ryan got the best of me. He gets the very best parent because I've had the most time to accumulate the skills for him. So sorry about your luck. I did the best I could. I hope you could appreciate that I put in a lot of effort. Which is, I think, also just being able to acknowledge that is really a good thing. And it's been, I mean, we laugh about it, but I think they also see the reality of that. So.
Yeah, I think my kids would say my grandkids, their kids get the best parent, pseudo parent. Yes, practice makes perfect, but never still achieving perfection, that's for sure, because it's an ever evolving beast, being a human being. And I think that's what I would reflect on is that this podcast is called On the Ground Parenting, and we're in the trenches as parents ourselves. And we're dealing with the day to day stuff. And there are some days when it's like the ground is firm and we're feeling like we're gaining lots of ground. And there are other days I feel like I'm slogging through the mud and I'm wondering if I'm ever going to make it out, or it's like quicksand or something. So carry on, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the ground parenting. We'll see you next week.
On the Ground Parenting is a production of Muskoka Family Focused Parent Education Program. If you enjoyed this episode and want to sponsor or support the show, or even ask a question of our hosts, visit the Central Hub at linktr.ee/On the Ground Parenting. On the Ground Parenting is produced, engineered, and published by Red Juice Studio. To learn more, visit redjuicestudio.com/nonprofits. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next Wednesday on the Ground Parenting.